Welcome to the Daily Freedomist Show featuring your host, Paul Gordon Collier. You can see that little avatar there. That perfectly represents me. I look exactly like that. Don't question the avatar. Never, ever question the avatar. This is coming at you live from the Black and Gold Freedomist channel here on YouTube. And if you're not subscribed, be sure you press the red button down below and the bell and all that. Like, subscribe, and share, and comment, and blah, blah, blah. You know, do the things that you're supposed to do to champion the cause that we represent, which is Christians in the civic. How do we live out our Christian walk while also being a part of the civic, which encompasses believer and non-believer alike. And to that end, we're going to try to do that. And if you go to Freedomist.com, you're going to see a lot more stories than the one that we talk about here, although we're going a little bit more depth here than we usually do on the site, although we do have analysis, all kinds of stuff on Freedomist.com. Go to Freedomist.com just to give you a taste of some of the stories that, if you go there, you're not going to hear about today. We have Taliban offensive launched across Afghanistan as U.S. prepares to withdraw. Sort of. We have partial financial disclosure reveals Kerry is conflicted. Grassley wants full report. Quantum computer potential accelerated with breakthrough in multi-node networking. Be excited. We have this story, I can't believe this story didn't, because generally speaking, we cover mostly the top stories that we put out yesterday and whatever news stories I might want to do that I get in the morning. So one of the stories I thought for sure would be talked about today is, did a BLM activist sneak onto the Chauvin trial jury? Evidence piles up that says yes. Hardly a blip. Unbelievable. And then we have China removes Christian apps from internet while tracking Americans with social credit monitors. And Australian general warns war might be unavoidable with China. Those are just some of the stories that you miss if you go to Freedomist.com. Go to Freedomist.com. You got subscribe and support to the Freedomist. You want to do that, and you get news and intelligence for free, people, accurate and timely. And click on the right-hand corner here of the News Watch page and watch this magic. Boom! Boom. What you get is our Newswatch page. On the top of the Newswatch page, you get the latest shorts that are here on the left-hand corner, and then on the right-hand column, left and right column, whatever. And on the right-hand column, you get the latest replay from the Daily Freedomist show that I'm doing right now. And if you scroll down, you're going to see all kinds of stuff there that we don't even get to talk about here. Will we get to talk about it in future issues? Well, sometimes we get stuff that's maybe 2 or 3 days old, but suddenly it gets popular and, well, we're going to talk about it. We kind of let our social media networks and our website, a combination of those, kind of determine what we're going to talk about on the show largely, not completely, but you can see all the stories that we got here. And we started a new feature where we're adding briefs, so I write these little briefs. And some of these stories are the ones that aren't the top stories for various reasons, but they're still worth talking about. At least I think so. There's the briefs. So, and then there's all kinds of whatever headlines, more, tons and tons. Filtered headlines, filtered news links for your pleasure. And with that, we get to our first story. Did Team Biden win the election using votes or magic math? Red State asserts that it was the latter. And this is a brief that I wrote called "The Biden Election May Be More Magic Math Than Votes. Biden U.S. Election Fraud Denial Arizona Adjudication." That's the key phrase we're looking for. Yeah, that's what we do. Our stance here at the Freedomist regarding the election is that it was... Well, I mean, it was a mass mailer election. So what are you going to take from a mass mailer election? That's the end stop right there. This, I think, is where the Republicans made the mistake. They should have just sued the government for having a mass mailer election instead of trying to go through all the areas to prove, was there an actual fraud that took place in the part of the election that happened as a result of a mass mailer election? I'm not here to dispute that one way or another. But I'm just going to point out that it's a problem that's not going away. No matter how much the Corpostate Nationalists want it to go away, no matter how much the Corpostate Nationalists want to try to lock people out from talking about it, it's just not happening. And we at the Freedomist, if we really believe there was total easy to see fraud, we would tell you that. But We're certainly not going to not talk about it just because our Corpostate Nationalists tell us we're not allowed to. Matter of fact, usually we're going to talk about something because they tell us we can't. Not always. We're not. You can't get us with that for first psychology stuff. Get us to do whatever you want. But in general, if you tell us not to do it, well, yeah, we're going to do it because we're Freedomists. We submit to the King, Christ, and as far as the civic goes, we submit to the King of this land, which is the Bill of Rights. But even the Bill of Rights is limited by Christ. So there you go. This fact alone, as I said, calls into question the legitimacy of the election. But in terms of the reality of power, this is what I want especially our conservative friends. We do have folks from multiple backgrounds that follow us and listen to us and have supported us, but we have a significant portion of conservatives. And this is what I want to get across to my conservative friends. The Biden administration is in charge and won't be surrendering power anytime soon. Still, it bears taking in the climate that we live in, where posting dissenting views is now considered anti-democratic. And I have more on that later in another story that we're going to cover. And when the underlying principle of democracy is supposedly liberty, a liberty defined by the Bill of Rights. As a matter of fact, the United States was created in a spirit of absolute dissent from the British government. It was created with a revolutionary spirit. Protest is a national sport in America, and it has been since its inception. And so now for you folks to suddenly come out and say suddenly that merely questioning the election is some sort of extremist rhetoric that should be taken off, we'll get into that in another story. I don't want to go too much into that because I want to save it for later to show. That way you keep watching, It's what you do. It's what you do. This item from Red State purports to show how Team Biden might have pulled off the biggest scam in U.S. history using a process called adjudication to create votes out of thin air. I'm not saying whether this is true or whether it's not true, but I am saying it's certainly worth a look, worth a ponder. And I just took this one excerpt, which we're going to go to the link, and I'm going to show it to you here from Red State. As the table shows, which I will show, don't worry, Biden received over 15 million more votes than Hillary Clinton did, while President Trump exceeded his 2016 votes total by over 11 million votes, unprecedented for a presidential re-election campaign, in which he also received the highest percentage of non-white votes of any Republican candidate since 1960. The Democrat popular vote margin over President Trump increased by 4.2 million votes from 2016 to 2020, while the WIMP vote from 2016 to 2020 decreased by nearly the same amount, 4.3 million. The similarity of the numbers is highly suspicious. So we can go in here. WIMP did adjudicate. I don't know what WIMP means. WIMP. All eyes are on the ongoing forensic audit in Arizona, despite fierce Democrat resistance. And I know they recently had a judge that said the audit can go forward. Other audits are likely in Georgia, New Hampshire, and Wisconsin. Should be in Pennsylvania, too. Should be in Michigan as well. But is there something else that has been overlooked in the frenzy to investigate or suppress, depending on one's political persuasions, claims of election irregularities during the 2020 election? Retired senior Department of Defense analyst Ray Bihar has examined an underreported election story pertaining to write-in and minority and minor party ballots votes. His investigation has resulted in some startling conclusions and a working theory that Biden's margins of victory in several key states could have been provided by shifting write-in and minor party ballots through ballot adjudication. So that's what we're talking about, ballot adjudication. I'll get down to this table that I would let you see. So here you see the major and then the WIMP. So the WIMP, I guess, is the minor party. So the WIMP lost votes just coincidentally, 4.32 million, while you see there the margin of victory there, 4.1. So was there a shift there? And this is the decrease. So did they really decrease by 4.3 million, or were they shifted over? That's the theory. That's what they're looking at. And again, I just want to say, for me, I don't really think that, and this is just my opinion, just so Paul's opinion. Y'all can take it however you want, but for me, the battle is really over the fact that the U.S. government, a federal republic, this is a federal republic, decided to certify, to carry out an election in the first place using a mass mailer election model, mass mailer election, and then certified a mass mailer election. That to me is it calls the whole question, the whole election into doubt. And I'm not saying whether Trump would have won or Biden would have won or who would have won, but there's no election. There's no election that happened. In my eyes, no election happened. I respect the reality of power. So if federal officials show up with guns, I'm not going to say, you're not my president, because Biden is my president. I don't want him to be. I don't know if I really want a president in the first place, but I don't want him to be. But the reality of power is that he is, and so I respect the reality of power because I want to live. And now I only respect it so far. I won't deny Christ. I won't do anything that caused me to deny Christ. But outside of that, I respect the reality of power. And I would really hope that the folks out there, whether you're conservative or libertarian or plenty of Democrats that are in this camp as well, or if you're like me, you're an unaffiliated, I'm kind of a small little subset within this whole group, this whole resistance to the DNC corporate nationalist machine. If you're in that group, I would urge you maybe to shift tactics from trying to adjudicate this election in terms of how it was actually conducted on November 3rd, whatever the date was, and then how it was certified on January 6th. Well, really, that's the thing. January 6th is the date. January 6th, you certified a mass mailer election. You have no standing, and that should be the focus. And I think I'll end this segment there. We got more on this a little bit later, so keep watching. And if you're just watching the short, make sure you watch the replay, which was aired on the Black and Gold Freedomist channel. Do a search for YouTube and do a filter for channels. You'll see the white and gold and the black and gold channels there. Biden and DHS looking for loophole to allow private companies to spy on Americans in violation of Constitution. So Biden is looking to outsource free speech and privacy violations to Corpostate Nationalists. That's essentially what we're talking about here. Now, this is from an Editor's Choice report, and we may or may not get to the other stories in the Editor's Choice report. That's never mind. Never mind. Biden administration is looking to contract out illegal spying on Americans to avoid lawsuits. Biden Department of Homeland Security spying U.S. citizens' private firms contract. That's our key phrase we're going for, folks. So this is from Newsbusters. Big Brother. Biden team may partner with private firms to spy on Americans online. This is Alexander Hall. This is an excerpt from Alexander. Thank you, Alexander, for the excerpt, although you didn't personally give it to me, but whatevs. The Department of Homeland Security is limited in terms of how it monitors civilians, but under the Biden administration, it may recruit outside firms to do its bidding. The Biden administration is considering using outside firms to track extremist chatter by Americans online, an effort that would expand the government's ability to gather intelligence but could draw criticism over surveillance of U.S. citizens. CNN explains, could draw criticism. You notice how they soft pedal that? Rather than saying the Biden administration is looking to illegally try to track U.S. citizens to find out who the DNC dissenters are so they could destroy their lives using corpostate powers, unaccountable corpostate powers. And they think they can get away with it by using corpostates rather than directly using government. By the way, is this sound a little bit like fascism to you? Because it sounds a little bit in the clinical sense of the term, what fascism, fascism is a lot of things, and there's many versions of fascism. So saying what fascism is hard to pin down exactly. But in one of the underlying tactics of quote unquote fascism is to use corporations, to use businesses that are controlled by the government to do the dirty work of the government, and have the government then the government protects the corporations with its guns, and the corporations can do what the government cannot do. Now, in this case, it's a little bit murky as far as whether you call it fascism or not, because I think the corporations are more the leaders than the government. It's really the corpostate nationalists who have the primary power in America, not government. Not the government people families that derive their power from government power, that they don't have power in and of themselves, and they're not looking to offset the Corpostate nationalist power even as they exploit it. It's complicated. It's a bunch of ruthless killers that are looking to stab each other in the back the first chance they get. So that's the situation that we find ourselves in. We actually find ourselves in a situation where the DNC, if they did win the election, they won the election by appealing to Americans' natural fear of actual white supremacism, racism, and bigotry, things that were fundamentally unaligned with King Bill, the Bill of Rights. And they did so by saying, if we don't stop Trump and the Trumpians, it's going to be a fascist state. Meanwhile, what they are doing is by the very definition of the term, fascism. They are fascist. At the very least, they're borrowing heavily from the fascists. These outside entities, by contrast, would access these private groups to gather large amounts of information that could help DHS identify key narratives as they emerge. You can be sure, if you keep watching our show, the Daily Freedomist Show, you go to Freedomist.com and you subscribe to our YouTube channels, the Black and Gold YouTube Freedomist and the White and Gold YouTube Freedomist, and even our partner channel, Aktun Batza, B-A-Z-A-A-C-T-I-U-N-E. We will keep tracking this, and as we find out more information, we'll certainly share it with you. But I'm going to share just some of the other headlines from, this was our Editor's Choice report. From Sputnik News, Russian propaganda site, unapologetically topping regimes since 1950, netizens ridicule CIA over, quote, woke, unquote, recruitment ad. And then we have from the Federalist, Johnson set up a case study in how agencies use corrupt reporters. And this is basically about the Washington Post and how it ran its fake agitprop CIA news. Whether it's CIA or not, it's from the CIA playbook. To basically soft pedal the rather sudden invasion of Rudy Giuliani's private space in what really appears to anybody but the DNC acolytes and their mindless followers that that seems like a political hit job, and that's certainly what it appears to be. So they ran a fake news story that said that Giuliani knew about this all along, and that if he cooperated more, it wouldn't have happened. But apparently that was all completely fabricated. Nigeria stopping the rejection of old or torn USD notes underline why crypto is a better reserve currency, from radar.africa. Is the census wrong? This is from 538.com. I think I covered this yesterday, and how that's a tactic that they're now going to be adapting. The very people that are trying to tell us that it's undemocratic to question the election results are questioning the census results. Yeah, there is only rule of power, and when I mean power, I mean physiological power with these folks. There's all types of power. Well, there's three main categories of power that I think of. There's genetic power, there's ideational power, and there's physiological power. Physiological power is when you rule directly through threat of death, and that's how this regime rules, and that's how the DNC rules. U.S. trade deficit surges to new record shortfall with China rises, from CNBC.com. And finally, France's far-right leader. Actually, I think that might I don't know enough about her from what I do know. It does seem like you might actually legitimately be able to call her far-right, so I'll reserve judgment on that. But still, whether she is or isn't, she wasn't called far-right leader because she is. Anybody that opposes the Corpostate nationalist, internationalist, whatever you want to call it, program, they're far-right. And apparently she's been acquitted of hate speech charges, so she can go forward with the election to try to unseat Macron. But I don't think that she's going to win, and not because she won't win, just because she won't win. I'll let you figure that one out. Alrighty. This one's a fun story. Next, China launches rocket with no re-entry plan, and it's about to hit the Earth. All 21 tons of it. Now there is a chance that it could burn up, but only a chance. So let's have fun with this one. China rocket orbit Earth fall 21 tons. That's our keyword phrase. And I'm going to call this, the video title is going to be China rocket set to re-enter Earth and crash Did they plan for this re-entry? Got to put that little question mark there. Gets people, just trying to get clicks, folks. Trying to get clicks without being the rage porn or rage sugar that, I guess you could say I'm fundamentally opposed to the fire and sugar methodology of delivering the news to folks. Not that I don't believe in some fire and some sugar, but we try to temper our fire and sugar in the Freedomist, especially because of how it's tempting to do things. We're trying to demonstrate Christians being in the civic. How do Christians operate in the civic? So with that in mind, I give you this title: China launches rocket with no re-entry plan, which is true. They don't have a re-entry plan. And it's about to hit the Earth, all 20 tons of it. And it is going to hit the Earth. Whether it hits the Earth in tiny fragments or large chunks remains to be seen. Most people probably are betting that it's large chunks. It's not super probable that they'll burn up. 21-ton China rocket falls to Earth uncontrolled. This is from NDT.com. Debris from a Chinese rocket will be falling to Earth in the next few days. It could land anywhere because Beijing launched the rocket into space without a re-entry plan. From Fox 35 Orlando, 21-ton Chinese rocket part expected to fall to Earth. The almost 100-foot core of China's Long March 5B rocket is likely to make an uncontrolled re-entry at an unknown point in the coming days. The spacecraft launched Thursday into low Earth orbit from Hainan's Wenchang Center, ferrying the Tianbei Mobile for the country's first permanent space station. Then we got from CBS News, rocket debris from China's space station launch is hurtling back to Earth. And scientists aren't sure where it will land. Alrighty. Here's an excerpt. A huge piece of space junk is about to make an uncontrolled re-entry back into Earth's atmosphere, threatening to drop debris on a number of cities around the world in the coming days. It's left over from China's first module for its new Tianhe space station, and no one knows where it will land. The 46,000-pound Chinese rocket Long March 5B recently launched the first module for the country's new space station into orbit. After the core separated from the rest of the rocket, it should have followed a predetermined flight path into the ocean, but now scientists have little idea where it will land as it orbits the planet unpredictably every 90 minutes at about 17,000 miles per hour. No, I'm not adding all those numbers. Screw that. 17,000 miles per hour is fast enough. As it soars through the atmosphere, appearing to tumble, it is slowly losing altitude. And then we get this from SierraSun.com. Listen, out-of-control Chinese rocket heading for Earth and more on Tahoe Talk Podcast. So they had a whole podcast where they talked about that. I'm only doing a segment. They did a whole podcast. Good for them. They must be scientists or something. Here are some conversation starters from around the globe and within your local community to add to your social... I don't care. Okay, so this is... There you go. I gave you the Tahoe Trout Farm. I gave you a promotion. You're welcome. Eye on the sky as China's Long March rocket wreckage falls to Earth from SCMP.com. Industry news site Space News said the more likely possibility was that the core stage would fall in an uninhabited area such as an ocean. The odds of a particular individual being hit by space debris are exceedingly... No, I'm sorry, I'm okay. I didn't get hit by the rocket. Are exceedingly low, estimated at 1 in several trillion, the site said. Okay, so there you go. I like my chances. Although I did hear, and I don't know if I had it in one of these links, but I did hear after I did this report, I heard that I read somewhere on the internet that if it does hit, that like it's most likely to hit the United States if it does hit land, and if it does hit land, it's most likely to hit in the East Coast. I live in Bethlehem, PA, about an hour or so from Philadelphia, and Philadelphia is one of the cities that could hit. So awesome. So if I die, remember me. Remember that I was killed by the Chinese government. Probably not going to happen, but what a way to go. Out of control piece of a Chinese rocket is hurtling back to Earth, and no one knows where it will land. From GrimsbyTelegraph.co.uk. A large piece of space debris, possibly weighing several tons. Oh, TONNES. Oh, I see. We're British. Well, it does say UK, so that makes sense. Is currently on an uncontrolled re-entry phase. That's space speak for out of control. You did say that. Uncontrolled is I mean, that's okay. And parts of it are expected. I didn't make this typo, and I don't fault you because I get typed. It's hard to get all the typos, so I ain't faulting you. Are expected to crash down to Earth over the another one. Oh, two. Oh, I don't know about that. Over the next few weeks. If that isn't worrying enough, it is impossible to predict exactly where the pieces, I guess, will hit. 100-foot tall Chinese rocket could head for Earth in coming days. 100-foot tall. Good morning, America. U.S. looks to take leadership role at whatever. Okay, I get that. Okay, so that's a little pitch there. All right, China rocket, Pentagon tracking out of control Long March 5B rocket that could re-enter Earth's atmosphere. And there you go, folks. So where, if you have an umbrella, titanium reinforced umbrella that is protected by some sort of I'm going to say Dr. Manhattan. If you have a Dr. Manhattan-styled umbrella with Dr. Manhattan powers, I think that's what you need. And then you'll be fine. Or force shield or something. You'll be fine. I'm going to reactivate my force shield after the show, because if I activate it now, this is how I would sign it behind. This is how I would sound behind the force shield. You don't want that. You don't want that. So I put my life at risk right now to do this show. There you go. All right, we're going on to the next story. I say that a lot. All right, we're going on to the next story. That's my little tick. It's one of my ticks. I got a lot of ticks. You should comment down below if that's true. Facebook to decide today if Trump will be allowed back on their platform. Yes! Facebook Oversight Board to decide Trump fate today, May 5th, 2021. I think I have 2022 there. I wrote 2022 on my little notes. Wow. I'm not that far off in the future. All right. This is from our top stories report, which I called Facebook Oversight Board to issue edict on Trump censorship continuation or cessation. If I had to guess, I would say, and I'm going to find out before the day is over how Kreskin like I am, but if I had to bet on the reality of power situation, my assessment is, well, I want to say that they won't. But and the only reason they won't, I think, is because, and I could be wrong, but I think that the reason, if I'm right, that they won't is because the election stuff is still not going away, and you don't want Donald Trump on your Facebook page constantly hitting you with the election stuff. But maybe you do. Maybe he'll sound more like a sore loser than someone who's got a legitimate gripe. I don't know. So I'm a little uncertain, but if I had to bet, I think it's 51-49. That's the split in my head. And I'm going with 51 that says, no, they won't. No, they won't. But we'll see. But I think it's really lovely that we live in a time and a place where the Corpostate Nationalists, using their quote-unquote social media platforms, can literally dictate to a former president of the United States whether he will have a voice in the public square or not. And Facebook is the public square. Twitter is the public square. YouTube is the public square. So if you're going to remove Trump from your public square, you just think about this. If you're in the DNC camp and you're cheering this on, first off, you're absolutely idiotic. You're not working for your best interest at all. Because if the Corpostate Nationalists have the power to lock out the former president of the United States, what power do they have over your lives? And if you imagine that you're going to be able to consistently stay on message with whatever the DNC message happens to be in that time of season, you're badly mistaken, because the message is going to consistently favor the billionaires that represent and control the Corpostate Nationalist government that we de facto have. So stop. Just stop. You don't have to become a Republican. You don't have to become a conservative, but you should stop being a member of the DNC, because the DNC represent Corpostate nationalism, and Corpostate nationalism always favors the haves over the have-nots. You don't represent the disenfranchised. You represent the franchised, using the plea of the needy to whip you into fear and hate so that you'll hand over more and more of your freedoms, imagining somehow that you're protecting the poor while you continue to support laws and policies that put the heaviest burden on we the poors. So just stop it. I could say a lot more, but I'm trying to be civil. Trying to be a good representation of Christians in the civic. So there's some stuff that I would love to do, but Christ compels me not to hate my enemies. I'm trying not to hate my enemies. I don't hate you. I just wish that you would stop, because you're hurting yourselves and your own children. From freebeacon.com, they say Facebook's oversight board will announce ruling on Trump ban Wednesday. Facebook's oversight board will announce early Wednesday whether it will let former President Donald Trump back on the platform months after banning him indefinitely. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg, that's a Zuck. He gets to be the power. He gets to be the little priest king here. Him and his little special little board, they get to be the little priest kings here. He announced the decision to ban Trump after the January 6th Capitol event. I'll let you decide whether it's riots or protest or what it was. I'm just going to call it an event and leave it up to history to decide, in history that is in the hands, not in the hands of the Corpostate Nationalists, because that history will guarantee that it'll be a revolution, insurgency, whatever. They'll put it in the worst light possible. Citing the then president, and I reserve judgment too. I don't know what I'm going to call it. I'll have to, until I get actual facts that I can sift through that are delivered to me by non-factionalists. So Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg announced the decision to ban Trump after the January 6th Capitol event, citing the then president's decision to use his platform to condone rather than condemn the actions of his supporters. The Oversight Board, formerly independent, I'm sure they are, independent body with whose decisions Facebook has pledged to comply, is expected to deliver its verdict around 9 a.m. The widely anticipated decision will set a precedent for Facebook's moderation of political speech. Republicans have criticized the platform for censoring conservative voices, and world leaders worried that banning Trump would endanger public discourse. Yeah, world leaders are worried about being banned themselves. That's another thing. That does actually, I forgot that. That might favor in them reinstating Trump, but they'll do so with shadow banning or whatever they can do to muffle his ability to spread his message. That is one thing that I can't believe I forgot that. I have to consider what's going on with Facebook, Twitter, YouTube is what they're beginning to see around the world is that there's pushback from all these other world leaders, because not all of the nation states out there are part of their informal coalition, this Corpostate Nationalist coalition. It's an informal coalition. I don't think they have a meeting room where they're all getting together, although maybe some of them are. I don't know. But what's happening is these nations, people who derive their power from traditional nation-state models, not corporate nationalist models, they're beginning to see the writing on the wall. Hey, man, if we continue to give these corporate-state nationalists largely stationed mostly in the United States and in Europe somewhat, but mostly in the United States, then our countries are literally going to lose their sovereignty to corporate-state nationalists in Silicon Valley. And so with that in mind, the corporate-state nationalists, in order for them to continue to make humans rather than serve humans, and that's what they're trying to do with their crappy services, what they need to be able to do is to derive revenue not from the particular nation state that they're in. So Facebook, if it ever has to derive its income from the United States of America alone, it will have to change and stop producing this crappy service that it provides, this selective service where its idea of free speech is basically the only people that can speak are people of the DNC. So with that in mind, they may just have to reinstate Trump, because if they don't, I think they're almost guaranteed. So I'm going to change my vote. I'm going to change it. I'm still 51-49, but I'm going to go 51-49. They reinstate Trump, but with limitations, and they give him warnings and guidelines as to what he can or cannot do. That would be my prediction now in light of that. I'm not going to get to the rest of the stories here on the top story, so you're going to have to go to freedomist.com to read them for yourself. It's called a teaser, folks. That's what you do when you're desperate for views, because views is clicks and clicks is money, honey. Let's get to our next story. Hey, record. There we go. Hit the record button, son. And if you're watching this segment, yes, I'm hitting the record button. You know what? I'm going to stop this. Hold on. I'm going to restart this. I don't want to have that in the video version that I put up on YouTube. I don't want to begin it that way. All right. Got to begin with the awesome energy, folks. Awesome energy. Keep them watching. Liz Cheney claims denying validity of election damages democracy. Taking talking points from the DNC. Liz Cheney declares dissent from the DNC as anti-democratic while still being GOP leader. She's like number 3 ranked in the House of Representatives. And absolutely, if the GOP actually is more than just the Washington Generals, that is the token party, the token team that's meant to lose to the Harlem Globetrotters, the Harlem Globetrotters being the DNC, well, then they would have removed her from leadership. They would have removed her from the party by now, because she is absolutely unhinged in her commitment to carry the DNC narrative, the un-American police state DNC narrative. And who is she? Who is Liz Cheney? Liz Cheney is the daughter of Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney is the real power of the Bush-Cheney years. He is the Darth Vader. That's what the left called him. Now the left loves Dick Cheney, of course. And Liz Cheney, they love her too. This all started, my theory, this all started with George Herbert Walker Bush. George Herbert Walker Bush came to power, and he comes from the CIA. He is a Corpostate nationalist at heart. He is absolutely unfettered by any type of loyalty to the nation. He's the one that started all this, by my theory. And he looked at China, and he saw that China could be a great resource for the Corpostate nationalists to derive power and wealth without having to serve the American people, so that they can go through the process of making humans in their perverse image so that they could eliminate competition once and for all for their lives. The Bill of Rights is a fundamental impediment to the Corpostate nationalists being able to run roughshod over all Americans, and they want to end it. And so they want to create a climate in which the Americans themselves will call for an end to the Bill of Rights, because whatever reason they can muster up. And he made a deal with the devil, with the Chinese fascist government, and they began to open up all of the resources to China. They gave him secrets. They gave him everything. They gave him access to our markets while we weren't getting full access to theirs. And that has followed from every president until Trump. And Trump's the one who threw a monkey wrench into the works, and that's why he must be undone. He is the Hatshepsut of our time. He is in essence, Hatshepsut is the female, the one that broke the model of what a pharaoh should be. Trump is not a female, but Trump broke the model of what a world leader should be, and a world leader should be one that walks lockstep with the Corpostate nationalists, and Trump didn't. Now, why he didn't, that's another matter altogether. But at any rate, Liz Cheney is Dick Cheney, and Dick Cheney is one of the masterminds. He comes from a CIA background. George Herbert Walker Bush was head of the CIA. Then he becomes president, which is something you should never, ever have happen. And then, of course, his son, and then there's Bill Clinton. Why do you think the Clintons and the Bushes are so close? Because they're all in the same thing, on the whole scam. And this woman is part of it. She shouldn't have even been allowed into the Republican Party, but for the fact that the Republican Party is essentially the Washington Generals of politics, and the DNC that they all serve, the DNC is the one that's intended to win all along. Even when the Republicans win, they do nothing to undermine the power of the DNC. Even when Trump won, Trump had the House and the Senate, but he didn't have the Republican Party. So nothing fundamental happened in the House or the Senate or even in Trump's own administration to fundamentally undermine the power of the DNC. So they could just pause for a little bit. But they didn't even fully pause. They kept advancing their ideological vehicle of power that they were using to whip people into fear and hate, whipping the poors into fear and hate, so that the poors were condemning the poors rather than looking at who was really their master. That's the oldest trick in the book. And Liz Cheney, she is the poster child for this. So as long as the Republican Party fails to remove her from her party and from their leadership, stop supporting the Republicans. They're not the party. They're not the party of the people. They're not a Bill of Rights party. The American people, we the poors, we need a Bill of Rights party, not this garbage that the Republicans constantly give us. And I don't even know if they're ever going to get rid of this woman in leadership. So here's how the media is reporting this. I'm just going to give you some of the headlines here. And media across the board. Red State is an agitprop organ as well. Although I've said before, as far as the right is concerned, they're a lot less shrill and less given to fake newseries than some of the other sites. They are a little bit more tempered in general. So from Red State, we get Liz Cheney does Liz Cheney things again, and her colleagues are just about done. Liz Cheney recently survived a vote on removing her from leadership in the House Republican caucus. She survived a vote recently, but that was a token vote. And Kevin McCarthy isn't going to do jack squat to remove this woman from leadership. He's just going to blister and bluster, and nothing will happen. That's my prediction. She thanked her colleagues by promptly going out and contradicting House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy publicly and making the Sunday show rounds to obsess over Donald Trump and January 6th. It was one giant middle finger to those who stood beside her, hoping she would now focus on helping the Republican Party instead of fighting pointless, long-past battles. Well, I don't know if I'd characterize that. This isn't a long-past battle. It's a battle that's continuing. She's trying to chill dissent in the name of the Corpostate Nationalists that her father and she serves. That she grew up in privilege. She grew up a wealthy woman. She went to all the best schools. The silver spoon dripped in the blood of the poors was in her mouth since birth. She knows who butters her bread. It's the Corpostate Nationalists. It's not we, the American people. She has more dependence on Chairman Z than she does on the American people for her power. Cheney takes more swipes at Trump as GOPers push for her ouster. This is from the left, from Talking Points memo. As some House Republicans suggest that the third-ranking Republican could be ousted from GOP leadership for her vehement refusal to elevate former President Trump, Cheney took her... No, that's not it. She's trying to say that Donald Trump saying that the election was a fraud is basically undemocratic, and we shouldn't do it, and we shouldn't allow it, and she's a police stater, very clearly. We come from America. This is a tradition of protest, and government doubt is in our very ideational DNA. It's how we got started. And this woman wants to tell you to stop being an American, stop doubting. Cheney took her feud with Trump up a notch in a tweet, hitting back at the election fraud falsehoods. Listen to this. You can't say these are election fraud falsehoods. I'm sorry. I'm not sure that I would want to say that what he's saying is right and true, and that there was the election fraud that he alleges. You can't say they're election fraud falsehoods. Not when you're writing a straight news article. And this is allegedly a straight news article. This is what Talking Points memo does. This is what they all do. They write straight news articles so that they can hit you with the agitprop. The 2020 presidential, and you don't have the critical your critical gatekeeping isn't up because you think you're just reading something that's point of fact. And so they write it as point of fact. Don't even doubt this. Listen, nothing to see here. You don't need to doubt this. The 2020 presidential election was not stolen. Anyone who claims it was is spreading the big lie, turning their backs on the rule of law. The rule of law is the Bill of Rights. And we have a fundamental right to doubt our government in all ways. All ways, including doubting the validity of an election. We have that right. For you to say that is to say that you're a Chinese Communist Party member. You're not an American. You should have your citizenship revoked. They should ship you off to China. I think I'll end it with, just a couple headlines. I know we're running late on this particular segment, but so be it. CNN Bible scholar Berman, Kevin McCarthy denied Liz Cheney 3 times. That's from Newsbusters. You can't get Christ, no matter how much these atheists, these godless atheist upside-down Christ want to. They can't get Christ out of it because the truth of Christ is everywhere. You can't avoid it. Republican Liz Cheney says Trump's election big lie poisons democratic system. There you go again from The Guardian. Trump, quote-unquote, poisoning democracy with big lie claim, key House Republican. News 24. I'm not going to read any more headlines. There you go. If you want to read more headlines, they're on Freedomist.com. You find them there. Using label of extremism, U.S. and Canada both seek to purge military government of Corpostate nationalist dissent. Yes, I remember when we had 911 and we were calling everybody terrorists, and the left, the quote-unquote left, which is really not the left. There is no American left in America anymore. It is the American right, the American traditional right, and then the American far right. And the American far right is most assuredly the DNC. They're far-right fascistic. They're police state fascistic, moral supremacist, race supremacists. They're an evil horde of madmen and madwomen. So using label of extremism, but anyway, back in those days, there probably still was a left back in those days, and so they were rightly saying one man's terrorist and another man's freedom fighter. So be careful when you're lobbing terrorist around at everybody, extremist around everybody. But now that they have the power, now that they control the means of cultural and social production, and now that they have their hands on government guns, now all of a sudden they sound like far-right Republicans in 2003. And they're using the same exact tactics that the Republicans used to convince us that the Patriot Act was A-OK. The Republican Party, the so-called party of the Bill of Rights, they passed the Patriot Act in which now you could have secret courts decide your fate without any due process. That's perfectly fine. That's what happened, and that's the climate that we still live in, and now the DNC is taking full advantage of that. So I'm going to call this video Joe Biden admin to label dissenters extremists as excuse to purge government of non-DNC, because that's really what's going on. What they really need, and listen, Donald Trump, he could have done this too. You know, when he was president, he could have done these same things. He could have declared the DNC people and their views extremist and then routed them out of government. Of course, it would have been harder for him because I think that Donald Trump was somewhat naive and really didn't understand the full severity of the end game that was being played, and he thought that he could reason with people. I think he thought he could reason people, maybe, but if he maybe had been a little bit more, a little bit more jaundiced, then maybe he could have used the same tactic to get rid of the DNC, to purge the land of the DNC, and we would all be better off if the DNC was purged from all offices, whether it's corporate offices or government offices, and most assuredly school offices. We would all be better off. The problem is, who would replace them? I don't know that we have many in the political field, left or right. I should put that in quotes, left or right, that would actually carry out a Bill of Rights agenda for we the people. I imagine the quote-unquote right would use the same, they would use the same type of tactics to try to eliminate competition that the quote-unquote left is now using. So we need like I said before in other segments on this very show, and I'll say over and over again, we need a Bill of Rights party that is peopled by human beings that have no experience whatsoever in government or in corporate boards, because those people, they're corrupted. You can't trust them. We need regular human beings that aren't deriving their power from corpostate nationalism. And that's not in the Republican Party. And it's certainly not in the Democrat Party. Extremism, political weapon, target U.S. military government personnel. Biden administration uses extremism as veil for purging government of non-DNC. That's our topic report. That's what this is, a topic report. Examining extremism in the military. This is from the left, 538. Around 10% of those arrested so far for their involvement in a January 6th event at the Capitol are veterans. Yeah, they shouldn't be arrested in the first place. None of them should be. The episode of Examined by ABC News explores what attracts former members of the U.S. military to quote-unquote far-right movements. By far-right, you mean non-DNC. So anybody that doesn't believe that you should teach your children about sin skins, their children are born with sin skins, and that their parents are evil, and that their very country is evil. Anybody that doesn't believe that that's a good idea, they would be labeled far right. If you don't want to create a condition in which children are vulnerable to grooming from probably DNC members, you are now labeled far right. If you oppose their particular agenda down the line, if you oppose abortion, you're far right. That's what they mean here. That's what 538 means. And they're just doing the job that they were hired to do by the corporate nationalists. That's all they are. They're just another fake news organ, a disinformation center. So, continuing here, explores what attracts former members of the U.S. military to quote-unquote, to non-DNC movements, and what the military, the DNC military, not the American military, because the American military is no more, because if it was, it would have stopped what happened on January 6th, but it didn't. It sided with the corporate nationalists, Corpostate nationalists, is doing to stop such quote-unquote extremism developing in its ranks. And then we have from Canada, and I wanted to highlight this because the same thing is, they're using the same exact tactic. By the way, you know how else uses this tactic? Recep Erdogan. Erdogan, the ersatz so-called president of Turkey. Erdogan uses the label of extremist to target people in his military. He's routed out anybody that opposes his Islamist fascist agenda. And these are DNC fascists is what they are. But they're still in the same camp. And why does the DNC hate Erdogan so much? Because Erdogan is them. They hate the one that's them. They don't want, because he uses the same tactics as they do, and he's effective. And so they need to eliminate Erdogan because he's stealing their thunder. I might be reaching a bit there, but at any rate, the Canadian Army investigation of a troubled reserve unit at the center of allegations of right-wing extremism, really non-corporate nationalist worldviews, identified several members as vulnerable and at risk of being swept up into a hateful ideology. Again, hateful ideology. I mean, this is the same group, the Canada, same as America, that is using this critical race theory garbage. 40% of critical race theory makes sense. The 60%, though, is horribly demonizing, damaging, and is demoralizing children that are being taught that they were born with either sin skins or victim skins. Either way, the children are demoralized, and their relationships to their parents is destroyed if they believe this garbage, because their parents are either weak, who refuse to protect them, or they're evil villains who attacked their friends and their neighbors. Either way, it makes them all more dependent on the authority figures and not their families. This is exactly what they want. So let's see, more headlines here. I'm not going to read any more of that. More headlines here. The normalization of anti-democratic extremism in the United States, the Cairo Review of Global Affairs. Yeah. And to them, again, they're part of the whole, the whole Corpostate nationalism. That's who they are. They're on board with that. They are totally on board with that. I'm not even going to read you their excerpt, but it's there for you to read. So you go to freedomist.com, you can read it. White House completes domestic extremism review. The White House said Tuesday that it has completed its assessment of the threat posed by domestic extremism and is looking at making policy recommendations in the coming weeks. I could report that we completed our policy review in the 100 days that we allotted for it, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki told reporters at a briefing when asked about the status of the assessment. We're taking a look at what occurred during that review, lessons that we've learned, and ensuring that the policy responses that we've been discussing and developing are the right ones. You mean the ones that eliminate dissent? That's what you mean. I'll end that report there. And I think I'll also end my show there, because that actually was the last story of the show. So I want to make sure you go to Join Us. Click on that little button, Join Us. It's right there, Join. You click on Join. Watch this. Join us. Support us, because we're never going to get any type of advertisers that have any kind of real money to invest in us, because the advertisers that have the real money are part of the Corpostate Nationalist Coalition. Even if they don't believe in it, they know better than to go against it. So we definitely are not advertiser friendly, not on YouTube, not anywhere. And so if we are going to continue to do what we do, we are going to need your support. So go and click the join button and become part of what we're doing on the Freedomists, especially if you're a Christian. But even if you're not a Christian, we're working in your interest too, because we want to create a world in which, yes, you can continue to hate Christ all you want, as long as you respect the bills of rights of your neighbors. That's all that we really care about, and that's what we're witnessing for here in the Civic. And so go to Freedomist.com and you can get all the stories that we didn't get to talk about today. You click on the Newswatch page and you'll get that whole link of stories, just massive amounts of stories for you to go through every day. And when I'm done with the show, I'll be going through more. And when you're done, be sure you go and you click on this button, the Capitalist Manifesto. Capitalist Manifesto, The End of Class Warfare Toward Universal Affluence by Ralph Benko and William Raymond Collier Jr. William Raymond Collier Jr. is my identical twin. He's also the editor of The Freedomist, and they have written a book forwarded by George Gilder, a very well-respected futurist. And in that book, they describe essentially the type of capitalism that we should be following, not the type of quote-unquote capitalism that we have been following. They call it crony capitalism. I call it market authoritarianism, but never know mine. We're describing the same thing. It's a market that has no morality. It has no virtue. It does not extend to its customers and to its employees the same Bill of Rights standards that we would like to see our government demonstrate. And that's one of the key problems. And without that virtue, the invisible hand becomes an authoritarian hand. It becomes an iron glove in a fist, or an iron hand in a velvet glove. There, you're getting the metaphor right there, buddy. Instead of what it should be, which is a velvet hand in a velvet glove. And with that, I'm going to end this episode. We'll see you on the next episode of The Freedomist now, or the Daily Freedomist Show. I want to let you know, 7:15 a.m., same back time, same back channel, right here on the Black and Gold Freedomist channel on YouTube. I want to let you know there is a chance, I'm not sure, I have to travel on Friday, so I may not be able to do a show on Friday. I may or I may not. It's still up in the air, but certainly I will be doing a show tomorrow, and if I don't do a show Friday, don't worry about it. I'll be back on Monday. I'll let you know tomorrow for sure. And with that, I say have a good day, have a good night, and